back to I'm Refocused Radio. We are back again, and we have another amazing show. We have a special guest today. His name is Jeff Wetherhold. He is a seasoned change consultant with over 2 decades of experience helping mission-driven organizations navigate transformation without losing sight of their humanity. As the founder of MI for Health, Jeff, he draws not just behavior science, but also motivational interviewing and proven communication strategies that will help you and your team not just be guided for a great cause, but from the opportunity of growth. Because without growth, there's no way you're going to hit the next level. And we're going to have an awesome show today. We're going to have him share his backstory and also his work has touched healthcare, higher education, and public service, equipping thousands of professionals like yourself for tuning into this show. So without further ado, let me land the plane. Welcome to the show, Jeff. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, Shemaiah. How are you?
Doing awesome, man. And, I tell people all the time, people think I've been doing this for since 2017 that I don't ever get nervous. No, it is part of my gig because wise men told me, when you're nervous, you care. So, man, thank you for making me nervous. I had to make sure I got a good intro for you, man. So you have a lot on your resume, so I want to do some honor for that. So before we do that, man, appreciate you being here on Friday, man. Before we get into the business side of things, what motivates you, man, to keep doing what you're doing?
I am motivated to keep doing what I'm doing because I know how many people are out there working themselves to the bone to try to help others, and how much of that effort doesn't come through. How much of it gets lost in well-intentioned, as they are, but misguided efforts to change the way that groups and organizations interact with one another and with the people they're trying to reach. And it breaks my heart to see the amount of effort that people put into their work that doesn't translate to impact on their clients, on their communities, on their peers, on themselves. So I want to help more of that break through. I want to help more people create more impact through their work. And I know that a critical part of that is helping people pursue change, lead others to change in more evidence-driven ways.
I'm glad I asked that question because you kind of, it's almost like you read my notes because I want to ask that because I felt like you were going to say the word change. So that prompts the perfect question I want to start officially for getting to business is, what do people most often misunderstand about change and how it works?
I work largely with organizations and teams, and in those settings, the most common misunderstanding that we have about change is that if you have the right plan or the right model, it's going to happen. That is going to lead to change, and that what's keeping you from realizing change is not having that model. We know that this is absolutely false. We have traditionally taught organizations and groups to change by focusing on what I often term the technical side of the work, how we plan, how we structure it, how we assign roles, how we measure where we're going and whether or not we're on track. These things are important. I don't want to diminish them, but I do want to say they're insufficient. They're not enough. And we know this from the statistics on how well this works. 88% of organizational change efforts fail to produce any lasting results. 88%. And when you talk to people about how change goes in their organizations and their groups and their communities, you can see the hopelessness on their faces often. And it's easy to dismiss it as pessimism. It's not pessimism, it's realism if this isn't working 88% of the time. We also know an awful lot about what's missing because there's really good research out there on what people ask for and where they say that change falls short. There's a research organization here in the US called ProSci that does a lot of really high quality surveys and research on this topic. And when they ask people what's missing, what do they need, they talk about a lack of awareness of change. They talk about support, buy-in. They talk about managing the people side of change. and the cultures that they work in, these obstacles are largely relational or conversational. They're not asking for help making a plan or understanding a plan. They're asking for help talking to other people about change and understanding people's reasons for change. And we owe them those skills. They're practically begging for them. We train people how to think about and plan for change, but we never teach them how to speak to it.
Hmm.
And plans don't change people, conversations do. Without those conversations, change doesn't work. Staff end up exhausted and disillusioned, and we take all of that effort and heart that goes into their work, and we make it much harder for that to translate to impact.
We look at teams and individuals who don't see how change can work for them. That
Mhm.
is that is part of the conversation piece that you're talking about when there's a disconnection there. How do you
Mhm.
typically see from your experience how they respond and how they can approach that better?
Mhm. So, a lot of my work is grounded in a discipline called motivational interviewing, or MI. Is that something that you're familiar with already?
No, break it down for me, man.
Okay. So, MI was developed about 40 some years ago to help professionals in mental health and recovery settings work with their clients to help them achieve goals that were meaningful to them, important to them. And a lot of people still look at MI as something that's relevant in mental health or recovery settings, or that's only relevant when working with clients. But in the decades since that approach has been developed, we have built up a massive body of evidence, 2,500 plus randomized clinical trials and counting, for how MI works in fields as diverse as leadership and organizational change, athletics coaching, pastoral care, dentistry, and yes, mental health and recovery settings. We know that these skills and approaches can have an impact across a broad range of areas, but we need to get better at translating them for those groups. Our, our reach as trainers and coaches and professionals has not kept pace with the evidence for how effective this work can be. So that's the foundation on which the conversational approaches that I teach are built. And the first thing that I work with people to do is to listen for ambivalence. So when I use that word, one of the core tenets of MI is that we are all ambivalent about change. We have reasons that we want to consider change, and we have reasons that we don't. And those reasons coexist, they're in flux over time. What I love about this is it gets us past this harmful notion that everybody's got a fixed attitude, this compulsion that we have to reduce it to a binary. You're with me or against me. You're for this or against this. When we approach change that way, the work is impossible because we have to convince someone to let go of all their reasons and embrace all of ours. I've never actually seen that happen. I don't think that that's the way change works. I know that from my experience, it's not. When we approach people's attitudes toward change as attitudes of ambivalence, then we have the option to turn up the volume on the reasons they already have the change, or to turn down the volume on the reasons that they have to consider not changing. And there are many paths forward. We can tune into some of those if they're not open to discussing others. We can pivot to a different strategy if our first guess for how it's going to go isn't working. But the first thing that we have to do is believe that that ambivalence exists. We listen for that as what we often call change talk and sustain talk. Change talk is just someone's argument for change in their own words, and sustain talk is their argument for against change in their own words. We always hear both change and sustain talk in a conversation. Often we hear them in the same sentence. I should make this a priority, but I don't see that happening right now. I should go for a run today, but it's raining. When we learn to listen for these, we can then make decisions about how we amplify them. And in that respect, we are little amplifiers. We amplify what others give us. And that is one of the most fundamental components of helping them change for their own reasons on their own terms. It's offering back, reflecting often their own reasons to consider change in a way that will help them focus on those. We have this saying in MI that I write down and reflect on every day, that we learn what we think as we hear ourselves speak. When we come into a conversation with that attitude, right? They have not made up their mind. They may not even be entirely sure how they feel. We learn what we think as we hear ourselves speak. That opportunity, and I really do believe it's an opportunity to think about your attitude toward change and refine how you really feel about it, is key to helping people move toward change on their own terms. And when you can practice these skills well, you can help them get there more often.
Once again, listen, Refocused already watching it. And today, talking to our guest today, Jeff Wetherhold. And we mentioned earlier in the intro about helping organizations navigate their transformation without losing sight of their humanity. I think that's a good point to dive into next, because to your point, some people listen to understand while others listen to respond. And true measure of growth is when you're able to reflect and, I'm gonna steal your word, pivot, because with any challenge is opportunity in disguise, and success is like failure being conquered. You know, it's not success, but just success. If that was the case, we would need a show, we would need a book, we would need motivation. But what you're saying is indicator that we have opportunity to navigate those tricky conversations or disagreements and rise to the top with each other.
That's absolutely right. And I love that you sort of called out that impulse to think about what you're going to say next or how you're going to respond when you're listening. I have those moments all the time. I don't think I'm alone. I think a lot of people have the experience of knowing they should be listening, but they're just thinking about what they're going to say next. I used to beat myself up over that a lot. And at some point, I came to recognize I don't think it's ever going to go away from me. What helped was to change the way I speak to people. When I learned to speak to people using more reflection, I had to listen. I didn't have a choice. I needed what they were going to give me. And that helped make me a better listener. So sometimes I have people come to me and say, can you just make me a better listener? Or can you just tell me what to say? And I'd like to think that I can help with either of those things. But the truth is, they reinforce each other. The way we talk to people changes the way we listen, and the way we listen changes the way we talk to them. And once you start to realize the benefits of that virtuous cycle, it can have a really profound impact on what you can do for others and what you can do for yourself to make these conversations manageable.
It's funny you said that, because I remember back in the day, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to be kind of old. And I was in community college in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I had a jazz instructor, and in the class, he talked about the call and response in jazz music. You know, the instrument, it does its little call melody, and then another instrument, it responds to that. But what makes the song amazing in the genre of jazz is how each member in the band creates room. So when you create pockets, you know, that's very powerful, because if you just kind of bulldozer your way through and just call the space, if you will, then it diminishes the art.
Yeah, that's a great comparison. I love improvisational music, and I will sometimes have people tell me that, oh, it's just people making noise. It's just people making it up as they go along. For me, when I learned to understand how much skill there is in being able and ready to respond, and being able and ready, in your words, to make space for others to make themselves better. Once I learned to listen for that, it was tough to unhear it. And it really made me gravitate toward improvisational music a lot. So that's a really meaningful comparison. That lands really well with me.
And it sets up the next question. It's like you've been in my notes today or something, but you train in, like I said in the intro, you train thousands of professionals. What's the single most powerful shift that you've been able to witness happen in people's lives once they begin to start using these tools and
Mhm.
understand the meaning behind these tools?
Yeah. Oh my, that's a great question. I mean, that experience of changing how you listen is an early step. We talked about that earlier, and that's really helpful. The next skill that I often work with people to help them build is to be able to reflect. And we know in MI that asking too many questions does harm to someone else's ability to change. We actually want to replace questions in many cases with reflections. We offer back our own lens on what we've heard in a way that will encourage someone to build on it. And that doesn't just have to be simply repeating what we've heard. When people first learn that, they often talk a lot. They think, oh, you're asking me to reflect. I have to reflect in paragraphs. And what's nice about that for me is that there's always something profound in those paragraphs. They're offering too much. They're saying too much. That's okay. I did it myself when I was first learning this. But I don't have to give them what they need. It's in there. What I have to teach them is to recognize it and be confident enough in themselves, to have enough faith in themselves to speak less and to learn to listen for what they're already offering that's going to have an immense impact on the other person. And to offer that and to pause, to leave space, to let that land instead of talking over it. I'm sure it can be helpful when I offer someone examples of what they could reflect back, but what I could offer does not hold a candle to what they make themselves, to what they will respond with themselves, both because it's going to mean more to them, and it should, but also because there's no script when we're having these conversations. They can't hit the pause button and like consult my worksheet on how they're supposed to respond. That's them. And in those moments, they realize, I can do this. You're not teaching me to do something wholly new. You're teaching me to focus on something that I can already do that I didn't recognize, or maybe I didn't have enough faith in. And that can lead to some pretty emotional moments, often positive, sometimes negative. I'll have, people get to a place where they wonder, why have I been having so many conversations the wrong way for so long? How much damage have I done? And you have to help people through that. But getting to that place and recognizing it's not about what some person walks into a room or a Zoom and hands you and learning to repeat that. It's about what you learn to appreciate in yourself and offer back and value in yourself. Those are the things that have a real impact. And those are the things where when people see it, I can see it land in ways that are a lot more meaningful and emotional, and for me, a lot more gratifying.
Again, listen and watching on Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Jeff Wetherhold. I want to pick up on the key where you said value. And value, uh, just personally speaking, is that comes from experience. Value is something that is drawn from both positive and negative experiences in life. And when you're able to mix them together, because you are what you have, and what you have is time on this earth. So everyone has a story, everyone has their ups and downs, how you got into a career, how you started your business, how you started whatever. The point is, you started. But
Yeah.
my thing I'm gonna do to land the plane is everyone put your finger in the air. What do you have? You have your own fingerprint. It's unique. That's what
Mhm.
makes you different because everyone is taken. So for you, I'm gonna throw the ball in your court again. Why is it so important for people to understand the worth of the value that they have to offer in their space?
That's what's going to help you connect with people. Repeating someone else's words, giving something that you just picked up from someone else, they aren't going to connect with people in the same way that something that is authentic and unique will. We, by and large, have very good noses for when someone's being inauthentic. I think most people have that, and they can feel it. and respond to it when you've offered something back that's very personal and that's not offered in the spirit just of you sharing something that's meaningful to you. It's offered in the spirit of strengthening the way they already feel about themselves or about something that they're part of. So nothing I can give a learner, a trainee, or anyone who's listening to this is going to be more meaningful or have a greater impact on that other person than what you learn to find in yourself. And yet there is a discipline to finding that and to trusting that. It is a discipline that is heavily dependent on practice, because this is really easy stuff to hear and smile and nod to and say, yep, sounds right. That's what I do. And then you sit down in a conversation and it's not what happens. It's not what comes out. And the real work, the work of coaching often is getting people to a place where it's not just about understanding what the right thing would be to do, but knowing how to respond in the moment. Right? In that respect, it's not a whole lot different from the way we think about coaching for like any physical discipline or sport, right? Lots of people know how to play baseball. It doesn't mean they all know how to play it well. Lots of people know how you should shoot a basketball. They aren't all good shooters. It's practice. And that practice is hard and it's humbling, but it's what ultimately gets you to a place where you see the immense rewards that can come out of this, but also where you see the value that you have to contribute that no one else could give you.
I like the sports comparison because to push that further along, anybody can have a microphone. Anybody can hold a basketball. Anybody can wear a jersey. Anybody can, you fill in the blank. But what makes you different is, like you said, what you do in the moment.
That's right.
And what's very interesting is I had a guy who was on the show in the barbershop days. He was an Air Force guy. Man, he said, no one cares about the day you're born or the day you die. They care about the dash. What did you do? Because whatever you did is going to either have an impact or it's not.
Yeah.
So the moment is powerful. Is you only get it once and then it moves on to the next. You don't get to replay your life and say, you know what, let me go back 5 days ago at 5 p.m.
Right.
And let's see if I can do that one more time. No, you only have one shot, man. No pun intended, but you only got one. You only have one chance, man.
Yeah, it's true. And the way in professional settings and organizations, like the ways in which we work with one another, and certainly the ways in which we teach people how to change, how to achieve change, they make it harder. They don't often bring in this conversational and relational side, which is essential. But also, I think it's worth acknowledging we live, eat, sleep, and breathe a culture that incents us to form strong opinions very quickly and to hold on to those very firmly. And when we learn to give people that opportunity, and I did say earlier, it's an opportunity to me to hear themselves speak. One of the things we learn is how little time they've often had to consider how they really feel about something. How few people have given them the opportunity, that space that we all need, I need, to understand how I feel and how much can be learned from that. So it's a hard thing to do under any circumstance, but I do have to appreciate that, like, I'm swimming against the current when I go into organizations that think about this work in a traditional way, but I'm also swimming against the current in a lot of ways in the culture within which we operate right now. And yet, from where I sit, that just makes this all the more necessary. We have got to find better ways to connect with others who feel differently about change than we do. I fear for us if we don't, if we can't find ways to be better stewards of one another and of the effort that we put into our work. But it is
Last,
possible.
my last
It is
question.
possible.
My last question before we sign off is: you work across healthcare, education, and public service. What common lessons have you seen carry across all those sectors when it comes to creating change?
How little time and resource people have received to help them think about these conversations. Um, I would love to walk into organizations that already appreciated the value of how they speak to one another about change. But the truth is that doesn't happen very often. I'm not I'm not trying to offer them a solution to a problem that they recognize in most cases. They've been taught to devalue this. They've been taught that the way you speak to one another about change doesn't matter, that it's not worthy of the kind of discipline or consideration that we would devote to so many other skills that we know are important in our work. So the first thing that I often have to do is make a case for why this deserves your effort. And there's a really strong business case to be made for how much time you're wasting rehashing the same failed approaches to conversations about change that have gotten you to exactly where you are. But at a personal level, I think about it from the perspective of all of those individuals who are working in healthcare and education and public service, and how burnout and exhausted they are. And we have statistics on change fatigue, which, by the way, is a proper noun now. It's a thing. We have so much change in these organizations. We've named change fatigue. It's prevalent. It's like 3/4 of staff who are reporting high levels of change fatigue and are more likely to leave their organizations. That exhaustion and the hopelessness that can come with it are just things that it's vitally important for me to help people avoid if possible, or move past if they're already there. Um, the people who I work with care deeply about their work. They care deeply about the people they serve. They want to do better. But if they could just do it on their own, they would have done it by now. They need and deserve skills and tools that can help them. And getting those organizations, those professionals, to a place where they're able to practice those, where they're able to approach change and helping others change, is something that's not hopeless or exhausting, but where there's real possibility, where they're able to focus on their core belief, which I do believe they all have at some level, that others can change, that we can see change in our clients, in our communities, in our teams, maybe even in our bosses, that is possible. Change should be motivating. This should be something that we see hope and possibility in. And that's something that is a common need across all of those sectors where I focused a lot of my work.
Once again, listen, I'm Refocused Radio, watching this online, talking to our guest today, Jeff Wetherhold. Last thing I would say is I gotta get you to plug your website, man. Before we really go out, if someone's listening to this and they're like, "Man, I want to check out what he does, any resources he may have," what's the best way to stay in touch?
Absolutely. You can find me at jeff.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jeff Wetherhold. If you're interested in my healthcare work specifically, you can go to miforhealth.com. And for anyone who's listening, I'm open to a conversation about how you can make this work for you. I have the time to talk to you. I have an opportunity to learn from you. And I hope that you have something to take away from this work. So if you're listening to this and you think maybe that's for me, or you listen to this and you think maybe I'm not so sure, but I want to check my skepticism about this work, please reach out. Let's talk. Let's learn more about how these approaches can work and help people like you and organizations like yours.
Well, like always, this was like a masterclass. I know, audience. I say that a lot, but it truly is, man. It's fortunate to be in this position, to be a sponge and have people like you be on the show. And not just give people the blueprint of what has been working for your life, but also help them find their own personal blueprint that will help them with their own personal life. So, with that, I want to say to Jeff, thank you for your time, man.
Thank you so much, Shemaiah. This was a great way to end my week.